Hello and welcome to On a Grand Scale podcast. This is where we explore what it really takes to scale meaningful work. My name is Nyoni, the founder of Grand Scale. We work with founder-led organizations, particularly NGOs and mission-driven enterprises, whose work has outgrown their personal capacity, helping them build leadership and decision-making systems that sustain growth without everything continuing to depend on them. This podcast exists because many great missions and businesses don't stall due to lack of passion or funding, but because the systems needed to scale haven't yet caught up with the vision. Each episode is an invitation to learn how impact really grows through leadership, strategy, finance, governance, and the hard decisions that come with scale. So today, I am joined by Erich Schlenker. Erich is the managing director of the School of Entrepreneurship at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, in the United States. In this role, he works closely with the Western North Carolina community to instill an entrepreneurial mindset and help founders and leaders achieve their personal and organizational goals. His work focuses on opportunity identification, customer discovery, business modeling, helping incubate good ideas through mentorship, coaching, strategic planning, and helping these entrepreneurs to fund, to launch, and to scale these new ventures. Before this, Erich founded and operated Synaptus, a Raleigh-based software training company that he grew and exited. And he also brings over a decade of experience managing brand and marketing programs for Intel Corporation. What makes this particular perspective relevant in this conversation is his deep hands-on experience across entrepreneurship, education, venture incubation, corporate systems, giving him a rare view of how leaders are formed and how organizations scale with intention rather than chaos. Erich, it is a pleasure to have you on this podcast.
Well, thank you, Uno. I am delighted to be here and very honored that
Fantastic.
I am on episode number one.
Absolutely. And you are there because of the vast experience that you have in all the things that we want to discuss around on a grand scale. So it felt so natural that you would be the first person that we talk to at this point. So let's start at the beginning, Erich. Where were you born, and what experiences in your early life shaped how you see work, how you see risk, and how you see opportunity today?
Okay, well, I was born in New York, here in the United States, state of New York on Long Island, and I was one of those kids that didn't like being told I couldn't do something. So it was pretty early on that I sort of got the bug for entrepreneurship. I convinced my parents to give me a few square feet of the backyard to plant a garden, and I planted vegetables and I put them in my wagon and I sold them to the neighbors. I just thought it was so fascinating how you could sort of create a micro business and put money in your pocket, and there was really nothing to stop you. So it started there. I got the bug. I was a kid who delivered newspapers. I mowed lawns, and before I was of working age, I was figuring out how to earn money and save money and sort of be in the business world. I found the whole thing fascinating. So for me, I didn't see risk. I saw opportunity everywhere, and I didn't really think of the consequences of things not working out. I don't know if it was a function of how I was raised or maybe a little bit of that is what you're born with, but I was scrappy, and as a kid, I liked to do what I liked to do and didn't like being told no.
Oh, really? And your parents kind of created this environment for you to be that kind of person? Because I know many folk that have issues with how they were raised because now they're only now trying to figure themselves out when they're adults.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? My parents didn't get in my way, so I don't know that they encouraged me to do anything like that. But if I said I was doing it, they said, "Well, knock yourself out, have fun, good luck." When I would try to sell like zucchini which was the easiest thing to grow in our New York climate, zucchini squash was my favorite. And I would get neighbors that didn't know how to cook zucchini squash. So I'd give them my mom's phone number and say, she's got a great recipe. Call her and find out. And they'd buy a zucchini squash and call my mom for the recipe. So it's just kooky little problem solving things you do as a kid when you don't know what you don't know, right?
Okay. Okay. So having a garden means you were kind of using your hands. You liked, the technical or the use of you could work with your hands, which is a very good trait. What else were you good at? What else were like your talents
I
as you were
I
growing up?
think I'm not sure that it was as much a skill as much as I didn't have any other resources to use, you know. I didn't have any other tools. All I could do was use my hands and dig in the dirt because as a kid, you don't have any other things available to you. So I think the other thing I would have had is the ability to just sort of knock on doors and talk to strangers. And if you kind of feel a little bit, I don't know, courageous enough, fearless enough, I don't know, to talk to strangers and introduce yourself and tell them what you're trying to get done, I think there's an element of that that comes in handy throughout entrepreneurship because you're not afraid to knock on a door and ask for some help or to sell a product.
Okay. Were your parents entrepreneurs or they were employees?
They were not. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my
Mm-hmm.
dad taught woodworking in high school. So very standard kind of traditional home life, and
Okay.
I guess I kind of broke the mold on that front.
Okay. Okay, let's move on from your young life to the corporate life. In
Okay.
fact, before that corporate life, what then happened? What informed the decisions that you made to choose? Is it engineering that you studied in varsity?
Yes. So I was one of those people that didn't know what I really wanted to do. I thought I was going to mow lawns my whole life. I liked working outside. I liked pushing a lawnmower. I liked being my own boss. And when I started to get encouraged to go to university, I wasn't really that interested in it. So I got my stepfather at the time convinced me to apply to his alma mater, and I agreed to do that, but only one school. And I was good at math and science, so all of my counselors told me I should try to study engineering, and so I did it. So I applied to engineering school, and in the time it took me to get my degree, I realized that I didn't really like engineering. I didn't know what it meant when I
Hmm.
applied to engineering
Hmm.
school. So,
Hmm.
as it turns out, I got my engineering degree, did an internship, didn't like it, but at that point in time, I was kind of set. For me to start over, I would have had to go back and redo the first few years of college. So I proceeded and got my degree, and then you mentioned I worked for Intel Corporation. So Intel
Hmm.
happens to hire electrical engineers to do their sales and marketing because they want us to be able to talk about
Ah.
the products and talk with customers. So I went
Hmm.
straight into sales and marketing with my engineering degree and never looked back.
Okay, okay. So the engineering degree got you into Intel because they knew you would have the knowledge of whatever it is you'd be selling. But you got into sales because you were done with engineering. You wanted to get into business. How did your life at Intel shape your um your journey as an entrepreneur or just as someone who's starting to, be active in business as an adult?
Well, that's a good question. When I first started at Intel, nobody knew who Intel was. Uh, One of my early projects at Intel was to develop, and I was on the team that developed and launched the Intel Inside program. So that Intel Inside logo that everybody sees on their laptops and in the advertising, I was on the team that did that. So It was really fun to watch the PC industry grow up from the inside. And so that itself was fascinating because the economy was shifting and changing. Computers were becoming more ubiquitous and people were using them in their day-to-day lives. I didn't grow up with that. So this was fascinating to watch. But I watched Intel go from a scrappy no-name company to a PC industry monster. And
Mm,
I watched what happened to an organization that was very top-down driven. So I
mm,
know that decisions rolled up to the leadership and everything went very slowly and nobody was empowered to make decisions because we had a very strong leader in Andy Grove and he called the shots. So what I
mm,
watched is a nimble company become a slow company. And over 10 years, that transition was pretty pronounced. And I learned a lot about management and scale from watching that all happen.
mm,
The
mm,
upside is that working for a large company, you have a lot of resources to train new employees typically. And so I did all of my sales training and all of my leadership training and everything through Intel. And it taught me how to lead. It taught me what it meant to be a leader. And I sort of found my legs from that experience.
okay. So, did you just do sales throughout your years at Intel, or it was uh different kind of positions as you were going?
It started in sales. I was
Mm,
working with IBM at the time. That was considered a strategic account, and so I was on a pretty big team. But
mm-hmm,
then it moved into what really we called corporate marketing. And
mm,
so corporate marketing was where we launched the Intel Inside program. And most of the rest of my career was managing a team of folks whose job it was to make sure the PC manufacturers worldwide were using the logo and all of its related technologies on their own advertising to get to sort of promote Intel as a consumer brand. So a little bit of sales on the front end, most corporate marketing on the back end.
okay. Speaking of that, particularly sales, how important was it for you to learn sales, and how do you um hmm, in the entrepreneurship uh journey, the selling skill and the skills that you got whilst you were at Intel, how much of that built up what you are using now as an entrepreneur as well as a coach for student entrepreneurs and practicing entrepreneurs?
Well, anybody who is getting ready to launch a product or launch a company already knows that sales is integral to their ability to succeed. In the beginning, an entrepreneur is usually either a one-person team or has a small team, but the founder is the salesperson, the chief advocator and advocate. And
Yeah,
so all the skills that I learned in selling about, how to position a product and how to knock on a door and how to be persistent and what to do with those few opportunities you get with somebody in a decision-making role, how to read people because not everybody in a decision-making role wants to be sold to the same way. Some of
right,
them say, give me the data and go away. I'll make my decision quietly on my own. Some need to build trust with you before they're willing to do business. And you've got to read the room effectively to understand how do I sell to this individual so that they're receptive. And keeping track of that and being able to show up the way they need you to show up was a skill I learned over time. And it pays off
mm,
tremendously when you run your own company.
100%. Okay. So you are then done at Intel, and then you get to start your own company. How do I pronounce it? Synaptis?
Synaptis, that's correct.
All right, Synaptis. What brought about that journey? What's on your mind at this stage? Why the move and why get into this? What was it that you were doing with this?
Yeah. So my wife at the time was also working for Intel, and she was working in the training department. And so they were developing a training solution for enterprise application software that was being implemented at Intel. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason they were doing that internally is because there was no available solution on the market. If you were going to implement one of these big enterprise applications, the implementation team would show up. They'd handle all the database setup and all of the technology necessary to make it work properly. But then they would leave. And the company had to
Mm,
figure out how to retrain everybody whose job was changing. So the person who used
mm,
to do something on paper was now having to use the computer. And that was happening all
mm,
across the country, the company. So the promise of these enterprise resource planning apps was that the
mm,
centralization of the data would that make things much more efficient.
mm,
But if you don't train the end users how to put good data into the system, then you don't get good
mm.
data out. So we
Right.
recognized that that problem existed. Um, my wife started a company creating those training solutions, and
Mm-hmm.
then she left Intel first and started to sell them on the open market.
Mm-hmm.
One of the enterprise application software companies contacted her and essentially began white labeling her product and selling it to customers. But in that
Mm,
agreement, she was not allowed to offer any sort of customization and delivery services. So
mm,
her product wasn't getting sold as much as we knew it could be sold. So
mm.
I left Intel and I started a company that delivered software training and implemented the solutions that my wife created. So she was selling the products, I was selling the implementation services, and we
Okay.
tag teamed the industry as it grew.
Right. 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 So you saw a gap and right coming out of your home and you were like, okay, there's an opportunity here. Let's go for it. Weren't you both kind of scared to leave a corporate job? Now Intel has scaled and both of you are employees there, and now you see this opportunity. What made you think that,
Yeah.
both of you are getting out at this and you're starting afresh on this? How, the certainty that comes with a month-end paycheck. What was going on in your mind?
Yeah, well, that's actually a really good question. And I have asked myself that same question looking back, because at the time I didn't really see the risk in it. It seemed like I had thought about it enough, I had done enough homework, I felt pretty confident that it was going to work. And I don't remember it feeling like a risky decision. I remember feeling like a natural progression of this business idea. And back to what we talked about earlier, sometimes risk tolerance is kind of like risk ignorance. And you sort of move
Right,
forward just knowing that you've got your tools, you've got your tenacity, and that
right.
you're gonna have confidence in yourself to pull it off. So we did it and it worked.
Okay. And yeah, I suppose I like what you say about that ignorance because you make your decisions based on what you know and what you
Right.
don't know at the time. And sometimes it's good not to know too much for you to be
Yeah.
able to move into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and what were the ups and downs of your entrepreneurship journey with Synaptis?
Oh, yeah, there were so many ups and downs because by the nature of the business, we were having to create training solutions when new versions of the software were released. So a new software would come, a new version would come out. We'd give it a few months. Everybody needed to upgrade. They needed to hire somebody to create training for the upgrade. And so we knew that our business was going to come in waves. And in between those waves, things slowed down. So you dealt with ups and you dealt with downs. And then the company got big enough so that you have your own inflection points where the company just gets big enough that you can't do things the way you used to do things. Now you can't just work harder anymore. You have to work different. So bringing on bigger teams and being able to increase the size and the number of customers, you have to sort of grow with it. And uh, I mentioned that I had an engineering degree, and that means I didn't take any business classes. So I had never taken a business class in my life when I started my own business. So I really
Right,
didn't know what I didn't know.
right.
So I learned these lessons by the seat of my pants. I learned through
Mm,
experimentation, trial and error, and had a couple
mm.
of painful lessons along the way. But if you keep learning and moving forward, eventually you figure it out.
Okay. What are some of those lessons that you learned during the Synaptis journey that you would like to share?
I think the biggest one is understanding how to delegate and how to develop your own leadership team. Because I think
Mm,
the assumption, at least that I was making, is that when people showed up, they sort of they were motivated enough and they were ambitious enough to figure out how to add value and that they would do it. And what I realized is that people need guidance, right? They need a vision, they need coaching, they need
mm,
training. And so
mm,
expecting people to move into roles and eventually leadership roles, if they didn't get
mm,
training and coaching and nurturing as an employee, then
mm,
oftentimes they were lost. And
mm,
so I had to, just so that we could be completely clear, teamwork is not a great strength of mine. So
mm,
I really wanted to hire people that would just sort of figure it out. And if I created a safe work
mm,
environment, if I compensated them effectively, that they would figure it out. And it turns out they
mm.
need more than that. And I learned that lesson hard.
That's the heart of scale, right there, where most entrepreneurs start off relying on themselves to do what they need to do, and then as the company grows, they now need to stop doing that job that they have relied on themselves to do and start working not on the job itself, but on the people they are having.
That's it. And
How was
delegation's not enough. You can't pass off the responsibility
come
and
on
expect
now.
them to know how to do it unless you give them the training and
The
coaching
coaching,
and
the
support that they
training.
need. Right.
Mm. Okay. So, what change of mindset did you have to have once your team started growing to then become that coach or trainer or delegate delegation expert that you needed to be? How did you transition, and was it easy, or because also this also comes with a degree of losing control of certain things that you are always in control of, and I'm sure as an engineer there's a bit of perfectionism that comes with this. How was that for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ironically, I learned during that time one of the most important principles that I use in my coaching practice right now, and
Yeah.
that is clarity and alignment. Clarity and
Mm,
alignment are the two things that anybody needs in order to lead and grow an organization or to scale an organization. And I
mm,
remember the day when I made that shift from somebody who just worked hard and kept their head down and pushed to somebody who actually had a strategic plan and was able to communicate that shared vision to the team so that they could get on board. Because without a strategic plan, everyone just works hard, but they're never quite sure they're working on the right things. And when they and that makes them
mm,
feel like they have to go to the leader and continue to get
mm,
that validation that they're on the right track. If you can
mm,
articulate a shared vision and provide some clarity for what the desired outcomes are, then everybody knows
mm,
how to work toward that goal.
right.
And then once every organization on your team or every individual on the team understands that shared vision, now they're aligned and everybody will work hard toward a common goal. And if they run into roadblocks, they know when to ask questions. They also know when to challenge your leadership. You said this was
Mm,
important. We're all doing this.
mm,
What you're doing right
mm.
now, the decisions you're making or whatever is misaligned. You get that feedback immediately because you have clarity. And
Right.
that was the biggest moment. That's the biggest transitional moment for me was the importance of that strategic plan and that shared vision.
And how did that come to you? Is that something that you just realized as you were going on? Did you have to go to entrepreneurship classes? Did you have to read up books? How did you figure out, okay, it's time to clear out this vision? And what did you have? I suppose at that time there were no one page strategic plan templates out. How like how did you make your own vision clear and so that people could get aligned?
Linda Smith.
Linda Smith.
I
Mm-hmm.
hired smart people to work
Mm-hmm.
for us. And Linda Smith was one of my consultants that I hired who had lots of experience, and the clients loved her, and she was great at her job. And one day she sat me down, my own employee, and she said, Eric, do you have a strategic plan? And I said, what's a
Hmm.
strategic plan?
Come on
And
now.
she took me through the process because I'm an engineer, right? I'm an engineer, been running my
Hmm.
own company for, by that time, I don't know, 3 or 4 years maybe,
Hmm.
and probably less than that, but still enough time that I should have figured it out by then. And she said, "What's your vision for what success looks like at this company?" I had never thought about that. She said, "Why are you getting out of bed every day? What does this company mean to you?" That was my
Hmm.
mission statement that I also did not have.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
she said, by the end of 2020, well, by the end of whatever year it was, what do you hope to accomplish? And what are the top priorities for this company so we can help you? That blew my mind. And I never went another year without a strategic plan from that point forward. That was life changing, and I'll never forget it.
Wow. I love that. I love that. Okay, that is good on scaling. Any any lessons you learned there around execution or cash
A cash.
management? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with no accounting background at all, right? I'd spent a lot of, I thought my accountant was punking me half the time, telling me what I could and could not do with my money. Um, but I think the thing that I wrestled with the most was the ups and the downs, right? Because
Yeah.
if you are trying to take advantage of all the opportunity in the marketplace while things are going
Mm,
well, you staff
mm,
up, you train up, you get all ready to go, and
mm,
you're making money like crazy. And then
mm,
inevitably, right, there are seasonality in all businesses. And when things would
mm,
cool off and you'd go into one of these slower times, now you had this big bloated staff that you either had to carry, in which case you would lose money and they had nothing to do, or you would have to
mm.
let them go, in which case
Yeah.
now you have morale problems. So for
Mm,
me, my biggest challenge was dealing with that surge capacity. How do
right.
we bring on people that will help in the really busy times without creating
Mm,
long-term commitments to payroll? And so we would
mm.
bring in contractors and we would have temporary folks that could come on and offload some of the work with the full acknowledgement across the boards that when things slowed down, their contracts would end. And
Okay.
it took a while to figure that out. And some of the ups and the
Mm,
downs got pretty painful, but
because you had to let some people go.
yeah, that was probably the toughest part.
Yeah, I can imagine. So at the then after this, you got to a time to exit the business. What informed that idea and how big had it gotten? And now you are thinking, now I want to exit. What take
Well,
us through that journey.
yeah, and it's probably not what you're thinking. We got up to about 75 employees. We had two
Mm-hmm.
offices, one in Raleigh, one in Houston, Texas. And
Sure.
we, to make a long story short, my wife and my family and I got into a really nasty car wreck, and
Mm,
it was serious enough that we both spent a pretty long time in rehabilitation trying to figure out how to walk again, and there was some
oh my
long-term
gosh.
damage that had to get adjusted and absorbed. So when
Oh,
we started moving through that, we just sort of looked at our finances and said, we have enough that we've done this long enough. Our kids were like 10, 9, 9, and 8. I have
mm-hmm,
four, and they were pretty young at the time. And
mm-hmm,
so our finance person, external finance person, was starting a private equity fund, a small private equity
mm,
fund. And I told him I was
mm,
interested in selling. And he said, well, this is perfect timing. How about we buy it from you? So
okay,
we sold the company to our finance advisor and
okay,
stepped out to focus on rehabilitation, which took a pretty
mm,
extensive amount of time.
okay.
So it really
Absolutely.
wasn't the way most
The
people exit,
desired
right?
outcome. Yeah.
I've got this great opportunity. Somebody is doing a strategic
Mm,
buyout. We're gonna be
mm,
flooded with dollars and absorbed into a bigger company. It wasn't like that. But we had
okay.
enough, and so I took the next 8 years off and just raised my kids, took care of my family, spent 8 years raising them through middle school and high school, and and after they started going off to college, that's when I decided to get back in the workforce. So that
Okay,
sale,
I'm gonna stop you right there. It's 8 years. So this you built a company that could give you enough money to not work for the next 8 years.
yeah, with four small children. So I was Mr. Dad for 8 years. And I made school lunches and I went to all the soccer games and I everything. I was all in for
That
8 years.
is so
Yeah,
cool.
it was really the time of my life, to be honest. It was really fun.
Wow. So it almost felt like this accident brought with it some big advantages for that 8 year period because some people never get to have that kind of time where
Yeah.
they're giving to their family for sure.
Yeah, and you have some trauma like that, and it really helps you to focus on what's really important in your life,
Important.
right? And
Right,
and then
right.
then then to have an opportunity to focus on what's important for such a long time, that part was a gift for sure.
Mm. Okay, so 8 years after, now you are in a totally different world. You now join the Appalachian State University.
Right.
It's no longer time for you to build companies, it's time for you to build entrepreneurs. Um, hmm. What motivated this move now to this kind of work?
Yeah, good question. So, we moved up after we sold the company. We moved up to Boone, North Carolina, because it's a great place to raise kids. It's up in the mountains.
Right,
Schools are good.
right,
Um,
right.
so I was in Boone, and when the kids started to look for something else to do, I knew I needed to get back in the game just because I didn't have kids to take care of anymore, and
Right,
I needed
right.
something to do. I was going to go crazy. Um, and you burn through your savings pretty effectively
For
raising
sure.
four
I
kids
know
with no
8 years is
income,
enough
right?
time to burn it for sure.
Uh, so I happened to be sitting on a board with a faculty member here at Appalachian State,
Right.
and I pitched him an idea for a smart app that would go on your smartphone. And he said, I can help you with the technology, but you really should talk to the Center for Entrepreneurship. And I said, Appalachian State is a center for entrepreneurship? How cool is that? So I went into the business school, I knocked on the door, and they said, yeah, we're swamped. We need to hire a managing director, and we're in the interview process right now. And I said, well, I can do that job. And so I went
Yeah.
home and I emailed them a resume that I had to create because I didn't have a resume.
All right.
Um, and I emailed it to them, and I got this job, and that was 12 years ago.
Wow.
And when
So,
when you have corporate experience and then you've got
yeah.
entrepreneurial experience and then you take 8 years off, it's really hard to be able to explain sort of what your skill set is because
Right.
hair with entrepreneurship, you've got so many different hats that you're wearing all the time.
Sure.
And you start to
Sure.
question whether anybody would hire you. Like, what am I good at? I'm sort of a generalist. I've been doing lots of different things, and my
Right.
Intel experience then was it was 15 years old by the time I wanted to get back into the workforce. So it turns out that the the sweet spot of all of my experience with corporate experience and entrepreneurship experience and all the volunteer work I did during those 8 years, it was like the perfect combination of experience to be the director of a center for entrepreneurship. There's very
100%.
few people that can walk through this door with an idea that I haven't had some kind of exposure to at least have the conversation. And I've recognized enough of the patterns in working and supporting entrepreneurs so that the patterns give you some scaffolding for which to support them, even if the industry is new or the opportunity is different than you've seen before.
All right. Right. So there you help entrepreneurs to launch their ideas, to attract funding if they need to fund them, and to scale them. So
Right.
I think my question is going to be in three parts. The
Right.
launching bit. So I've got an idea. I've been moving around this idea, but I want to explore what it is that it's going to take for me to get started. How do you, the Appalachian State University, kind of help these entrepreneurs, or I these people with ideas to figure out whether this is something that they need to get into, whether there's an opportunity, and whether they can explore it?
Yeah. So a lot of people will come into the center and they'll pitch you the idea and then they want you to tell them whether or not it's going to work. Right. And
Mm,
I do not go there because I have no
mm,
idea whether or not their idea is going to work. There's
mm,
only one
mm.
person that can tell them whether or not it's working, and that's the customer, right? So
Right.
what I tell them is, I don't care if you bring me a lemonade stand or you bring me a
Mm,
tech company. The only way you're going to know this works is if you follow a process that goes and socializes this idea among your ideal customers in a way that you're not leading them to the conclusions that you want them to have, which we know as customer
mm,
discovery, right?
mm.
And try to figure out how to mitigate as much risk as you can in the early stages before you go invest a whole bunch of
Full
time and
on.
money, right?
Right.
So it's all about customer discovery and business modeling. Go
Mm,
find your ideal customer, make
mm,
sure that they agree that your product is solving a problem worth solving, and then
mm,
model the business so you have an idea on paper how it's likely to generate revenue, what's the cost structure, and will this throw off
mm.
enough profit to make it worth your time? All of
Right.
that, customer discovery and business modeling, can be done on paper. So the risk of doing that is zero, but the upside is tremendous. And there are plenty of people who go through that process and realize this isn't going to work. So I'm not
Mm,
going to move forward with the idea in this current form. And then they make adjustments and pivots and changes and they test it again until they get a model that they think is most likely to succeed and something that has eliminated as much risk as possible. And even then, you do low cost, low risk experiments to test this idea to see if somebody is going to be willing to pay for it.
that's right. That's right. And that customer discovery time is very important because that's market validation. You're going for that so that you understand if something that you're going for is going to be successful or not. And then at some point you're going to realize after that that you might need more funding to be able to take advantage of this opportunity. What are some of the mistakes or assumptions that people make around funding
Mhm.
um, that usually come up as you coach entrepreneurs that are now thinking, okay, funding is my next move?
Yeah. I think people sort of misunderstand the intention of an angel investor. And we can talk about banks, we can talk about lots of things, but the angel investor is the investor that's going to give you money in order to make your idea scale. And
Mm,
so there's a whole bunch of misperceptions along the way. The first one is that the the investor is needs to love the idea. The If you love the idea, it's not enough to tell them how great the idea is. You've got to show them numbers. An investor is going to look at the viability of the business based on what the numbers say. And people think
mm,
that in that early stage, they can make
mm,
forecasts of what those numbers might be. But what an investor really wants to see is traction. They want to see that you've already got revenue
mm,
because they want their money to grow the
mm,
business, not to form the business.
mm,
And so it's all
mm,
about getting started organically, raise the money or pull the money out of your
mm,
bank account, borrow it from friends and family, maybe take small business loan out against some collateral that you have. Get enough of the money together so that you can demonstrate traction. Then an investor is going to
right.
want to talk to you. But the farther you can get down the path and the
Mm,
higher you can grow your revenue, the less expensive that investment money is going to be. Because if an investor
mm,
comes in and you want to raise $100,000 and you're just getting started, the risk is super high that you'll fail. So the investor's going to
mm,
say, fine, this $100,000 is going to make or break your success. I need to have 40% of your company
right.
for my $100,000. Whereas if you're
Mm,
already growing, you're already beginning to scale, you're showing that market traction, now that investor might only need 10% of your company in exchange for their
mm,
$100,000. So
mm,
the traction affects the valuation, and that valuation affects how much of your company you need to give away to get that investment. And you gotta find that right balance because eventually you need money, but there's other ways of getting it other than trying to convince an investor that your idea is good. You have to
mm,
demonstrate that your business is viable, and that's a big difference.
mm, mm. So you might as well spend so much time getting the traction right and that customer discovery, that selling, the basic bootstrapping that needs to be done before you look for the funding, because then the funding is cheaper and also the funding is being used to scale and not necessarily to form what needs to be formed.
Yeah, you're not using the funding to experiment. You're using the funding to scale.
Hey, no
The
one wants to
experimenting
does
should be over. You should know what you're
hey.
doing.
But why does it sound like most of these tech companies are still in experimentation stage and still they can get funding in that?
Yeah, well, you laugh, but some of those stories are floating around and people hear those stories and they had to get, that's what creates that misperception. Those are
Ah,
rare situations
right.
that the average entrepreneur is just simply not going to face.
That's true. Okay. Okay. So the other question around funding then has to do, so you are working at Appalachian State University at the School of Entrepreneurship. And I suppose the School of Entrepreneurship by itself is a nonprofit business or
Hmm.
a business in some, you have to attract funding for the organization and things like that. What are some of those lessons that, social entrepreneurs and NGOs might learn around how do you attract funding to to make that social cause that you are working on? Like for you, it's developing entrepreneurs, right? How do they how what's the difference between what you do when you're looking for angel investors and what you do when now looking for funders who may be looking for other benefits but not necessarily a financial return on what they're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And but it's important to remember that those nonprofit kind of operations, they are businesses too. They do
Mm,
their accounting different, right? But they still have
mm,
to earn enough money to keep the lights on. They still have to cover
right.
their costs. They have to staff the operation, and they still
Mm,
have to scale or grow in order to increase their impact. So
right.
most of the principles of business apply to a nonprofit the same as they do for a for-profit. But the major
Mm,
exception is what you talked about, right? It's the whole point of a for-profit business is to return value to shareholders. The
mm,
point of a nonprofit, a mission-based company, is to create impact. And
mhm,
so, in one hand, for the for-profit business, those investors are looking for a return on their money, more money in exchange for their money. On
mhm,
the other side, the value that gets created gets measured differently, but that's the only difference.
mm,
What they are
mm,
buying with their investment, with their donation, is impact.
right.
And so they have to know that the money that they are donating is having the desired impact and that there is an organization behind the claims that are going to make that impact possible. So when you're
Mm,
raising money in a nonprofit environment, you've got to get your messaging right because they're not going to care about operations. They care that you have set up a company, nonprofit, albeit nonprofit, that is going to create the desired impact. And you have to find an
mm,
investor or a donor that cares about that impact. And so you're trading social impact for revenue
Mm.
generation and profit generation, but everything else is the same.
Right, right. You mentioned something very important there. The return for this donor is communication based. It's of course the results that's given, but if you don't communicate the results that's given in a way that satisfies them to a point where they're saying, "Hey, we've got the
Hmm.
return," then they will be a disgruntled investor or a donor at this point, right?
Yeah, and just like the old adage, right? It's easier to re it's cheaper to retain a customer than it is to get a new customer. And so
Right.
any investment that you make to retain customers and get that repeat business is a very big
Mm,
investment. It's an important investment that your company makes. On the same, just the same on the other side is retaining a donor and keeping them engaged and being a recipient of whatever annual giving that they're going to do each year is way better than finding a new person that cares about your cause.
right,
And
right.
and you're
And
right,
what
it's
a
all about communication. And it's also data collection because your impact has to be measurable. You can't just go into a donor and say, "This was the greatest year. We made so many people happy. It was very fulfilling." It's not gonna cut it. You have to say, "We touched this many lives and saved this much and served this many meals and whatever it is," right? You have to show
quantify
data,
the impact.
quantify the impact. Exactly what I'm trying to say.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. And so that you can say you did this with
Right.
your money, this was possible.
That's it. That's it.
Mm, mm. Um, what are some of the ways that this has been demonstrated in your experience that kind of makes what you know? These are good either communication strategies that attract people, that make people walk in and say, "Hey, we want to work with you," or "Hey, we want to stay on for another year." What are some of those, you know, things that you consider uh, non-negotiables? This has to come out
Are
from
you
the organization to be maintained or to scale.
are you talking about a nonprofit world?
Absolutely, in the
Yeah.
nonprofit world.
So I'll give you an example. We have in the US, there's been lots of talk about how hard it is to afford health care, especially if you don't have health insurance.
Right.
And so we have in our community a community care clinic, which gives free health care to anybody who does not have health insurance.
Hmm.
And we had a grant from the state government that was a 3-year grant that funded our whole operation. And we treated thousands of people.
Hmm.
Well, thousands of appointments. Sometimes it was the same person. So the actual number of patients was lower than the visits. But anyway,
Hmm.
um, I became chair of the board at a time when that grant was running out.
Hmm.
And we were looking at a giant hole in our budget because we no
Hmm.
longer had grant funding and we were going to have to figure out how to engage the community and find other sources of funding. And at the
Right.
time, we relied only on grants and not on donors. And so we had to
Hmm.
completely rethink our messaging. We had to get out into the community. We had to make sure that we educated people on the problem. We had to make sure that they were aware that we solved that problem. We talked
Hmm.
about the value of having a healthy community, the value to our economy and to our workforce and to families. And you change the narrative so that people say, yes, I'd like to be part of the cause that creates healthier communities, stronger workforces, better economies, and that way you have people that are believing what you believe, sharing in your mission, and giving their hard-earned money to make their community a better place. That can be extremely rewarding for somebody to be given the opportunity to
Hmm.
help in that way. But they have to
Hmm.
know that the need exists and they have to know that their money
Hmm.
is addressing that need in some sort of way.
Hmm. Mm, mm. That's important. Kind of reminds me of a of a Bible verse that says, "How can they know if no one has said it to them or if no one has preached to them?" And in
Right?
this case? If no one has said this is the need in the community, how can they, suddenly become interested in the problem that you have?
That's
And
it.
so what you're saying about that creating that interest in saying, hey, this is what we do. So you
Yeah.
ended up covering that gap?
Yeah, we did. And we actually left the year with a surplus. But the trick is that in order to really make it real, we have a
Hmm.
lot of people that own houses in our area, but they live somewhere else. They have second homes because we're in kind of a mountain sort of community that
Right.
has a lot of second homes. So we
Hmm.
sent letters to their actual home address, and we said, when you come to Boone, remember the person that waits your table and serves you your food when you go to a restaurant. Think of the person that bags your groceries. Think of the person that picks up your garbage, right? Or whatever it is, right? These tasks that sometimes we take for granted. These people have
Hmm.
families, they have lives, they
Hmm.
have financial obligations, and in order for you
Hmm.
to have the kind of experience that you want to have when you come
Hmm.
here, you've got to take
Hmm.
care of this community, and this is your way to do that. And that message resonates.
And people started coming through. So I take it then that the one big funder, which was government, was then replaced by many smaller funders that came through, and so that the organization was no longer, it didn't have that one donor dependency risk,
Yeah,
right?
and don't get us wrong, right? We also applied for new grants and did other sorts of
Mm,
funding, but that was the
mm,
beginning of our donor development. And
right.
what the donor development is it sort of diversifies your revenue stream so you don't have all your
Mm,
eggs in one basket.
right. Yeah, and that is at the heart of a challenge we're facing right now in the nonprofit world because of the developments that have taken place with USAID and things like that, because they were a
Oh,
big
right.
donor that has. So if you would have many organizations that had that so much of donor development hadn't grown as much. And because of that, that risk got them, unaware at the time. Um, how do you stay alert, right? Of the need for donor development when there is no danger yet.
Ah, yeah, boy, we do get soft when things are going well, right?
Yeah.
It has to do with that long-term strategic planning. You have to have contingency plans. You have to imagine what will I do if I lose this major
Mm,
customer who now represents 30% of my business? What am I going to do if this grant goes away? You have to have contingency plans. That way, when something goes wrong, all you have to do is very calmly pull out your strategic plan and execute to the plan that you created when you were relaxed, when things were going
right,
well, when you were being
right,
creative and thoughtful. And as soon as you get into that panic mode of, oh no, right, the world is collapsing around me, that's the bad time to make plans because it's very chaotic. So to
right.
the extent you can, while the sun is shining, right, develop those contingency plans.
100%. Oh, this has been such a lovely conversation, Eric. One last question for you now. Now that you are, coaching entrepreneurs and executives at a higher level, I want to ask what your sort of like how has your definition of success kind of evolved,
Mm.
and what encouragement you would give to founders in this kind of tough season right now.
Yeah, so very often, entrepreneurs are so busy and they feel the weight of the responsibility of their company on their shoulders that they keep their
Mm,
heads down and they just push, 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 push. And
mm,
they're in their mind thinking that at some point in time out in the future, there's this milestone called success. And sometimes they'll put a number on it. I need to make a
mm,
certain amount of money. And when that happens, I'll be happy. I will feel successful. And so all of the time between right now and when that milestone is achieved is nothing but hard work and grind. And what they discover when they get the payoff at the end is that they realize I'm not any happier than I was before. I don't feel any different. And all I've done is essentially squander this period of time in my life, neglecting my family, neglecting my kids, neglecting my health to be able to make this happen. And now that it has
Mm,
happened, I don't feel any different. I've seen that happen so many times that I encourage those entrepreneurs to recognize what they, great, have a goal. By all means, have a goal. But then ask yourself, why do I want that goal? Why do I
mm,
want that amount of money? Why do I want that? And then
mm,
usually it's because it addresses some basic human need that they have for significance or for contribution or for love and connection or whatever it is. If you can get them to answer, why do I actually want that? Then what you can do is you can start getting that in the journey, not at the end of the journey.
mm,
So if I want to
mm.
make a bunch of money and I'm going to do that because I want to create opportunities for my kids or I want to spend more time with my kids, or you can do those things now with some effective time and priority management so that you're
Right.
not deferring all of that
Mm,
fulfillment to some future date, which when it comes, it might be too late.
mm. No future by and by. Start planning your personal life as you do your business life as well.
That's right.
That's
And you
really
have
cool.
to set it up so that you love the journey because the journey is
Yeah.
all you got. And if you are
Yeah.
sacrificing the time it takes to build your business and sacrificing
Mm,
all the things that are important to you to be able to achieve
mm,
that goal, then
mm.
you set yourself up for regrets. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you shouldn't work hard. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be dedicated and committed. You should do all of those things. It doesn't take much to carve out some time for the people that you care about and to do the
Mm,
things that are important to you along the way so that by the time that happens, there's still people around to share it with.
yeah. Yeah. That is so important. Eric, my friend, thank you very much for coming to On a Grand Scale podcast. It has been such a lovely time, and there are many nuggets that we're going to get out of this podcast. So thank you very much. And this is it. And to all our listeners and those that view us on different platforms, keep tuned in and make sure you subscribe to that channel because there is more that's coming that's helping you to scale your organization to the next level without drama. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uno.
Super.